Today's Candid is a very interesting recording because this is the 5th time I've started this video. It's not something that I would like to do because the whole point of this being candid is to allow you to see me in the struggle and to see me real and process things in real time in the moment. And at the same time, I also don't want to torture you with all of the blankness of my mind from time to time, my rambling that doesn't make sense. So I'm starting over. And if you want to see the first 5 takes, I haven't decided yet, but I may put them in a separate folder and give an access link to that. I haven't really decided. And I'm going to try to keep the essence of all of those videos in this video so that it doesn't lose the topics that I was talking about and all the emotions that I was having. But at the same time, I understand that our attention span is less than a goldfish these days, and I would probably immediately lose 95% of you if I were to have posted those instead of this one. So I'm starting again. All right. So why am I struggling today to make this video? 5 times I've started this. The very first candid video I made, that was the one, and that was it. And I can tell you exactly why, and that's what the topic of this conversation today is going to be about, and it is my ego. So I'm going to start all of these. Well, I don't know. I can't say that for certain. I'm going to start this one, sharing about the state that I am in mentally, emotionally, and physically before I begin, so that you can see the difference between this video and another video based on those states and see how those states change how we show up from moment to moment. Because this is Brittney, but tomorrow's Brittney may look different, and yesterday's Brittney may look different than today and tomorrow, right? But in this moment, this is me. I was very nervous this morning when thinking about making this video. If you've ever had that feeling of just dread, you're just like, oh, it's on your to-do list and you're just like, I just don't want to do it. And then you may find yourself distracting yourself, as I was doing. I was hopping on social media. I was going through my emails. Then I click on social media again. Then I go back to my email, hoping that there was another email for me to read so I could say that I was doing something, that I was busy. But really, all I was doing was distracting myself from making this video. And the I that I am speaking of is only one part of me. I have 2 eyes. I have the true me, the true essence of my being, that is content, that doesn't worry, that speaks the truth, that knows deep down at a deep level, that is intuitive, that is loving, that is compassionate and understanding, and curious. Then there's the other part of me that is my ego. The part of me that says, I am Brittney-Nichole, and you are not Brittney-Nichole. I am all of my labels. I am a white, female, married, American, all these labels, emotional intelligence specialist, whatever, all these labels. Some may even tack on things like, I am a good listener, I am confident, I am blah, 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 blah. And when the ego does that, when the ego places those labels on us, now that's a tricky way of saying that, right? When the ego places those labels on us, because the way that I see the ego is, while it is part of me, it is not me. Just like my arm that kind of looked weird. Just like my arm is part of me, but it is not me. I could chop it off and I would still be me. Yet it is part of me, but I don't need it. Right? Now, some might argue, well, we need our ego to survive because it helps us. It is our fight or flight. It triggers our fight or flight response. It's always looking out for danger. And yeah, our ego is important as human beings. But its place of importance, we have, I feel like, elevated up to here, where it should be like baseline. Should be like baseline. So give me a minute because I just lost my train of thought and I'm going to get a sip. So I'm going to pause. Okay. Yeah, I see these two parts of me. One that I feel like should be tiny, and one that I feel like should be the all-encompassing, that uses that tiny ego that is instinctual, that is primal, that is built for our survival to help us understand and make sense of this material world that we're in. I believe it should be just a fraction, a very tiny percentage of my being. But the opposite tends to be true in the society that we live in. Few of us, I would say, are even aware of our true self. We hear talk about the true self and we think we know our true self sometimes. I thought I knew my true self until recently. And when I say recently, probably like, I don't know. It's hard to say. I knew that I was more than just my ego years ago, but I'm really now starting to see just how big my ego was and still is in my life. And that's what I'm trying to work on. I'm really trying to work on that. So my ego going into this video was like creating all these nerves and anxiety. Don't do it. Wait till you've sat down, you've kind of figured out what you're going to talk about. Don't just go on camera and just speak for hours. What if people judge you? What if people have nasty things to say? What if people check out before they've heard your true message because you didn't take the time to plan it out and be concise? What if? And then my true self is saying, what feels right? What do you feel like you were being guided to do? What if they don't like it? But what if someone finds a nugget of value in this and can resonate with your struggles and can resonate with how you process information? And what if the real you is what they really needed? What if? And that is what I am pressing forward with, my true self. The reason the first 5 takes of this video failed was because my ego was so attached to the outcome, so attached to perception. How am I going to be viewed? Am I going to articulate this in the best way? Right now, I feel like I'm bouncing back and forth, right? Because again, these are candid, they're not planned. I want to go back to the ego again and how it shows up in our lives. Because here's the funny thing, since I've done 5 takes of this and I got pretty deep into the first few, I don't know what I have said in this video or the other video. I don't know what I've already covered. So I may do a little bit of slicing and dicing of this only if I'm repeating myself. But just know, like, that's the only slicing and dicing that I plan on doing. Okay. If you watch the first Candid video, I talked about truth and how truth just is. And our egos like to capture the truth. Our egos like to be a poacher of truth and take it from that context and try and apply that truth to every other context. And some people say, well, sorry, my dog is making a little bed, so I'm going to pause for a moment. The ego likes consistency. It doesn't like the unknown. So it makes sense that our egos would want to capture the truth and then assume that that applies to every other circumstance and situation for several reasons. One, it's easy. We don't have to discern whenever we discover the answer, so to speak, right? We don't have to be aware and vigilant and present. Instead, the ego's like, okay, I've got it. This is what I believe. This is the truth. And what I mean by the context doesn't necessarily have to be the actual situation at hand. The context could be an idea. If I believe that this person has done this thing, then I am going to say that the truth about that person in that context that I have created in my mind, this is who they are. And if all of that were true about what I had created in my mind around that belief and all the data points that I had pulled from reality, then you could say, yes, in that context, that narrative, that would be true. But we have so many missing data points and so many different contexts that we're not aware of that the truth doesn't apply the same way. I just find myself just getting so lost in all these things because it's like you see that everything is attached. Nothing is separate. And so I'll talk about the ego and then I'll talk about truth, because the ego and truth are really important in navigating to figure out like our true self and how our ego is hindering us from being in our true state. But it's a little overwhelming because the ego is really the source of all of our problems in the world. It clings to things. And that's where I think I was getting at. The ego likes to cling to things because that's the easy thing. Once we have everything and we've collected everything, then it's easy to coast and operate from those systems of beliefs because we don't have to think anymore, right? That's where I was going with that. But the problem with that is because the ego is rigid, it's not fluid, it becomes stagnant. We become attached not to just our systems of beliefs, but we have these expectations. We become attached to outcomes. We become attached to people and possessions. And if things change and we're still holding on to that, what we felt was a constant, then it's going to create a lot of disruption and disturbance in our lives. So if you feel that disturbance in your life, then just know that's your ego, not your true self. The true self, as crazy as it may sound, another clue when we're operating in our ego is that truth sounds a little insane. Truth sounds insane. Truth sounds too good to be true. And you know, there's that statement, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Again, this is where it gets messy because, yeah, in context, the ego likes to make things like, for example, if someone says, all you have to do is click this button and you get $1 million. Sounds too good to be true, right? Well, that probably is, but that's because an ego is pitching it, right? The ego is pitching it. But there's other things that sound too good to be true that actually are true. But the ego is like, it can't be that simple. For example, so many times when I was dealing with certain things, people just said, you just have to let go. Just have to let go. Sounds so simple. They're just saying, just let go. I'm like, I don't know how to let go. How do I let go? Tell me how to let go. They say, I can't tell you. I can't give you that answer. You have to figure it out yourself. And I'm like, well, I don't know how to do this. This is a real problem in my eyes. You just have to let go. And sadly, that is the truth. Sometimes we just have to let go, but our ego doesn't know how to let go. And for me, letting go, I talk about it in the term of surrender. Surrender. Letting go of outcome, letting go of worry, and only focusing on what I can do and what I can control. That's letting go. Focusing on what I can do, what I can control, and trusting that everything else will work out in its own time. To be vigilant in those difficult times. And that's really hard. It's really hard. Trust isn't easy. And I think in today's time, with our ego being strengthened by fear and by chaos and by gossip and by distraction and by entertainment. I don't know where I was going with that. This is what happens, like you get lost in something. Our ego is being fed by things that we don't even realize it's being fed by. Awards, titles, positions, obtaining new things, higher salary. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with buying something you enjoy, with getting a raise, with getting a promotion. There is nothing inherently wrong with that. What creates the friction, what creates the disease is when we are attached to that thing that we got, when we are attached to that title, when we are attached to that raise. Because if we lost our job and we had to find another one, if that thing, let's say our house burnt down and all the things that we had collected are gone and we have that attachment, then we're going to suffer. And if you say, that's really hard, I want you to think about everything in your life, like the people in your life, the way that you're living your life, the things that you may take for granted. If you say, I'm living a good life right now, and I'm happy and I'm content, ask yourself, would you be happy and content if all of those things were gone? Because I know for me, well, the answer right now is I don't know. There are moments where I say 100% I would be fine because I have faith and I have trust that I will make a way, that the universe will make a way if I surrender and trust in that and I do my due diligence and I put my energy into it as well. But there are days where my true self is being suppressed and drowned out by my ego. And that faith and that knowing is not so clear. And some people may hear me say something, again, from years ago, then they hear me talk now, and maybe they'll hear me talk 10, 20 years from now, and they'll watch this video or another video, and they'll say, you're a hypocrite. At one point, you said this, and then later on, you said this. You're a hypocrite. Well, by the ego standards, yeah, I may be seen as a hypocrite. Let's talk about hypocrisy for a second. Because again, things are just as simple as they are complex, and being able to see the complexity and simplicity simultaneously is where we see clearly. Hypocrisy, to me, comes in two different forms, conscious and unconscious. Actually, I don't even know if there is conscious hypocrisy, because I feel like the reason for hypocrisy is an unconscious awareness for the way that we behave, how we contradict ourselves. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the way that it's kind of coming to me is hypocrisy of the true self versus hypocrisy of the ego. And then how there's like a dual hypocrisy. Ugh. Okay. So like the true self, if 10 years ago I believed in something and I was convicted in that belief, and it was true to me in that moment in time, and then later I realize I'm privy to new information, and now I'm like, I don't believe that anymore because I have this new insight. I wasn't necessarily coming from ego the first time. It was just that was what was resonating or true for me in the moment, and now it's not, and now this is true for me in the moment. And so that's one way the true self can be or seem very hypocritical, but it's really not hypocrisy in its true nature. It's viewed as hypocrisy by the ego because, again, the ego likes to attach itself to things. So if the ego attached itself to one perspective, then yes, it's going to seem very hypocritical. Instead of the ego saying, well, that was then, this is now, I am only, well, the ego doesn't do this. But when we put our ego aside, our true self can say like, well, that was then. That's the past. I don't bring the past into the present moment. That's the true self, right? The true self lives moment to moment. It's not concerned with the past, and it's not too concerned with the future. It's not to say that it's not vigilant of the future, but it doesn't live in the future. It lives in the present and realizes that what we do in the now will determine the future. So if I am honest now and I am content now, then I am more than likely going to continue that in the future. Anyways. Okay, let's talk about the hypocrisy of the ego. If you've ever known someone, maybe you yourself have done this. I know I have done this. I'm going to speak more about me doing this. If you've ever witnessed someone talking poorly about someone, what they've done, how they look, yada, yada, doesn't matter what it is. And then they do the exact same thing, clear as day. You may say, how in the world did they not realize? Like, they are literally the exact same thing that they're talking against. What a hypocrite. So this is the traditional form of hypocrisy, right? They say, what a hypocrite. You literally are doing and saying the things that you talk against. And this is my personal interpretation of what that is, because this is what it means to me, right? And that's typically how we interpret things. We interpret it through what we know and also what we've experienced. And then also sometimes a deeper knowing, right? There's the knowing intellectually, but then there's a spiritual knowing. And then there's experience. Okay. So from my experience and what I believe that this means is that It's when we can't accept that thing that we don't like within ourselves. So like I'm going to use judgment because that is something that to this day I am still working on. Okay. So I originally started to use an example and then I just abandoned that example. So I'm cutting that out because I was rambling. So here's an example of hypocrisy that I've noticed within me. So I get really irritated with other people's intolerance of others and lack of understanding. It drives me nuts and it actually just creates a lot of anger within me. Like I just find myself getting really worked up when I see people like making quick judgments and condemning other people when they know nothing about them. It really ticks me off. And it's kind of funny, right? Because I just said that judgment when it was one of the challenges or the struggles that I was working on in myself. So this is my belief of why we are hypocrites. I believe that it is done at a subconscious level, and it is us trying to right the wrong that we haven't made right within ourselves. So if I haven't accepted myself, then I'm not going to be very accepting of other people, right? But yet I desperately want acceptance. I want to be accepting of myself. I want to be accepting of other people. And I am, in my heart of hearts, against criticism and judgment and people making remarks about people when they know nothing about them. And so as I am working on myself, trying to resolve that within me, my ego is very impatient and wants to feel good about that resolution. So it believes that by righting the wrongs of others, by telling others what they're doing wrong, it almost makes it right and just. Now, I'm conscious of my hypocrisy. Now, I'm conscious of it now, but I wasn't before. And I think that's the case with many of us. We're just not conscious that our hypocrisy and the hypocrisy of others is simply showing what that person themselves is struggling with. And it's very clear to us, right? Like we can see it as clear as day that they're struggling with the same thing. But then we call them a hypocrite, and then we believe, like, who are you to do that? But see, they're not even aware that they're doing it, more than likely. I wasn't aware. And there's probably things that you're doing that you're not aware of, right? Like we're all guilty of this. But we always look for it in other people. We always like when people hear me talk about certain things, they'll say, "Oh my gosh, I know so many people. You are so right. So many people do that." And I know these people. And I'm like, wow, you failed to mention yourself because you're doing the exact same thing. They'll say, yeah, they don't see it. And they say that as they are also not seeing it. So if anything, I encourage you, when you notice something within someone else that you despise and don't like, maybe ask yourself, where am I still struggling with this within myself? And when you ask that question, you're engaging your true self. And some interesting things start to happen. But the ego will always come back in and make you feel nervous, make you feel sick to your stomach, make you feel angry, make you feel justified, make you feel self-righteous. All of these things I have experienced, especially the self-righteousness and the anxiety. those are the two biggest indicators that my ego is in full control. And self-righteousness, for me, has come in the form of artificial confidence. And it really shows in my tone. It's more demanding, less understanding, less patient. If you are impatient with others and you are impatient with yourself, that is the ego. You know the saying, it's in, I think, Corinthians, 1 Corinthians maybe, I don't know. But it's said at a lot of weddings, like love is patient, love is kind, love does not boast, love does not blah, blah, blah. That is your true self. Your true self is love. Your true self is oneness. Your true self is acceptance and patience and understanding. If you are not acting in love, in patience, in trust, in kindness, in humility, then rest assured that is your ego guiding your life. And it makes us feel justified. And it makes us feel like everything is happening to us instead of for us. I embrace, I got to be careful with how I say this. I was going to say I embrace chaos, and I'm like, I don't know about that. I don't welcome chaos into my life, but I do embrace what difficulty and challenges and discomfort have to offer. Because I now know through way too many experiences that it is a gift in disguise. That every struggle of my life is only a struggle because I am still holding on to something, because I am not letting go. And the reason that I'm not letting go is because my ego is saying, that's safe. That's safe. Don't let go, because then you're going to get swept away in the waters. But if you let go and allow yourself to get swept away in those waters, you're going to find that you are emptied into a calm pool of it's hard to put it into words. When I let go and I allow myself to get carried away into the flow of life without worry, it always takes me to a place of clarity, of contentment, of calm, of love, of understanding. Always, always, always. And so I dive in. I plunge into the unknown and have trust that what is going to be shown to me is going to be well worth it and is going to make me better for it. Always does. I could talk a lot more about the ego and about the true self, because it's a very deep, vast topic of conversation. But I feel like this is where I'm going to just stop. This is where it feels right to stop. Otherwise, I'd be forcing myself to continue to say, did I say enough? Did I add enough value? That's my ego talking to me. But my true self is just like, okay, let it be. If something else comes to mind, start another video. So if you somehow managed to endure this entire video, thank you, I guess. um, but I really hope that you were able to find some value in it. And if you were, I would love to hear what that value was for you. So please put in the comments, like, was there a nugget that you took away? Is there a question you have? Is there something that was confusing to you that you didn't understand that you would like to hear me kind of expand upon? Please put it in the comments. I would love to have this dialogue with you, even if it's in the form of like a back and forth comment video Q&A. So until next time.